The scent of pine needles and damp earth hung heavy in the air, a familiar aroma that usually brought a sense of peace. But tonight, it felt like a pressure, a weight pressing down on my chest. It was the third day of our annual camping trip, a tradition that had always been about laughter and camaraderie, but now, it felt like a stage set for a drama I didn't know how to navigate. My head felt like it was buzzing with a high-frequency hum, a constant reminder of the shift that had occurred in my world, all thanks to Liam. Liam, my best friend since we were 7 years old, scrawny kids with scraped knees and grass-stained clothes. Liam, with whom I'd shared every significant moment of my life, from awkward first crushes to triumphant sports victories. He was now 19 and I, Alex, was 18. We were on the cusp of real adulthood, and yet, it felt like our friendship was being rewritten, right before my eyes. He'd always been just Liam, my rock, my partner in crime, the other half of a dynamic that felt as natural as breathing. But for the past few weeks, it had been different. It was as if the world had suddenly decided to play a cruel joke, tilting the ground beneath our feet, throwing us off balance. It wasn't anything concrete, just a subtle shift in the way he looked at me, a certain intensity that made my breath catch in my throat. We were supposed to be just friends, comfortable in our shared history, but now every glance, every casual touch felt like a live wire, sending jolts of awareness straight down my spine. This trip, our yearly escape to the woods, now felt like an exercise in navigating this newly charged atmosphere. And to make things more complicated, tonight was the night where I was sure everything was going to explode. The other guys were milling around the campsite, their voices a low rumble as they prepped for bed. The usual teasing and jokes were there, but I felt like I was observing them from behind a glass wall, my thoughts trapped in a loop of confusion. My gaze kept drifting back to Liam. The firelight cast long shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp angles of his jaw, the way his hair had a tendency to fall forward, obscuring his eyes. It wasn't just that he was good-looking, it was the way he was Liam, the person I knew better than anyone, and yet, somehow, he felt like a stranger. It made my heart beat a rhythm that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The more I tried to analyze this, to put it into words, the louder it became, like some broken record of self-interrogation. When did the friend I'd grown up with become someone I found myself obsessing over? When did the simple act of existing alongside Liam turn into this weird, heart-pounding ordeal? He was readjusting his backpack, and his eyes met mine, a question mirrored in the depths of his gaze. "You all right, man?" Liam asked, his voice a low, rumbling melody that always had a way of calming my nerves. I froze, his words like a punch to the gut. My cheeks grew hot, and I fumbled for response, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, just tired, you know," I replied, knowing it was the same old excuse and that he'd see right through it. Liam's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing me with that familiar intensity, like he was attempting to unravel a complex code. The fire crackled, its popping embers punctuating the silence, echoing the unspoken tension between us. It was like a dam was slowly filling, and I could feel the pressure building, a sense of inevitability creeping in. "Seriously, what's up?" he pressed, moving closer, stepping into my space. The familiar teasing tone was there, but underneath, I could hear something raw and earnest. My throat went dry. I could feel the tremors in my hands, the way my heart was hammering against my ribs, threatening to break free. "Look," I stammered, shoving my hands deep into my pockets, as if trying to physically hold back the truth. There's something I need to tell you. About us." The words hung in the cool night air, raw and exposed, like a confession I'd been desperately trying to avoid. "Things feel different lately. I can't explain it, but it's all I think about." The silence that followed was heavy, a dense blanket that threatened to suffocate the clearing. It was the kind of silence that could either break something irrevocably or create something entirely new. I braced myself, convinced that I'd just obliterated our friendship, the safety net that had been there for as long as I could remember. But instead of freaking out, his expression softened, a flicker of something that caused my heart to do a somersault. He studied my face, searching for something that was hidden even to me, I thought. Then, his fingers grazed my arm, just below the sleeve of my shirt, a simple touch that sent a jolt straight through me, igniting every nerve ending. "Me too," Liam whispered, his voice barely audible above the chirping crickets. It was like a punch to the gut, a sweet, unexpected blow that knocked the air from my lungs. "Me too." The world around us seemed to shrink, the vastness of the forest closing in until it was just the two of us, spinning on a new axis. This was actually happening, the unspoken words suddenly given life. My brain struggled to keep up, caught between a mix of disbelief, elation, and a desperate, frantic, "What the hell do I do now?" He moved closer, the heat radiating from him a tangible thing, his eyes like a silent question, asking me if I felt the shift too. And then, in a slow, almost dreamlike motion, he leaned in, and it was as if everything went silent, the sounds of the night fading away as our lips met. His lips were soft, a gentle press, and all my carefully constructed walls crumbled into dust. It was just us, in our own bubble, the chaos of the world outside fading into oblivion. It was more than just lips meeting, it was a connection, a spark that felt both inevitable and forbidden. The other guys were starting to head into their tents, scattered around the clearing, and we both knew it was time to separate. We walked quickly to our tents, pitched side by side under the cover of the trees, and headed inside, our usual shared tent suddenly feeling alien. It was dark and close, and suddenly, very real. We'd always been so good at keeping things casual and safe, that being so alone together felt very, very risky. "Whoa," I gasped, recoiling, my heart hammering against my ribs, the earlier elation replaced by a cold wave of panic. "What are we doing?" Liam just stared at me, his eyes full of questions, a mixture of confusion and something else. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice tinged with uncertainty, "but it feels right, doesn't it?" My body was buzzing, every nerve ending on high alert, but my brain was screaming, "Danger! This is Liam. Cross that line, and there's no going back." Then, he stepped closer, his hand resting on my shoulder, his fingers brushing against the skin at the base of my neck, his eyes burning with a newfound intensity. "We're not going to mess anything up," he declared, his voice firm. "I've been thinking about this for ages. This isn't some random thing. I want this. And I think you do too." He was right. I did. But saying it out loud felt like jumping off a cliff without a parachute. All the feelings I'd tried to bury were now bubbling to the surface, demanding to be acknowledged. "I'm lost," I admitted, my voice a strained whisper. It felt like I was being pulled in two different directions, one towards the raw, exhilarating want, and the other towards the crippling fear of the unknown. His hand slid down to my wrist, the touch grounding me, offering an anchor in this sea of uncertainty. "Hey," he said softly, "we don't have to figure it all out right now. We can just see where it goes." The words were a balm, soothing the panic, if only a little. But what if someone finds out? The words were barely a breath, reflecting the fear that clawed at me. "The guys." Liam cut me off, his eyes locked on mine. "Nobody needs to know, yet." He paused, a glint in his eye that was both thrilling and a little dangerous. "It can be our secret." The thought, like the forbidden touch, ignited a rush of exhilaration, but it also came with the weight of potential exposure. It felt like walking on the edge of a cliff. Looking at Liam, so close I could feel his breath on my skin, I knew I wanted to take that chance. "Okay," I agreed, trying to sound braver than I felt. His face lit up, and before I could think straight, I was pulling him closer, and this time, the kiss was different. It was a declaration, a commitment, like we'd both accepted the consequences, and were willing to leap into the unknown. It wasn't just about our lips, his hand moved to cup my cheek, his thumb brushing across my skin. The kiss deepened, and I felt my own hand move to his waist, my fingers digging into the soft fabric of his shirt. This wasn't just a kiss, it was a physical manifestation of the complex emotions we'd been holding back, a release of all the tension that had been building between us. It felt like a spark, finally igniting into a flame. It wasn't just about our lips, it was about all the shared jokes, the late nights around the campfire, the stolen glances across the clearing, everything we'd been up till now, finally clicking into place. It felt like we'd been circling this for years, and had finally found our center. The tent shrunk to the size of a heartbeat, and I realized we had been barreling towards this, an inevitable collision of feelings. But then reality intruded, sharp and jarring, like a bucket of cold water. We were in a freaking tent, in the middle of the woods, surrounded by our friends. I recoiled, gasping for breath. "We have to stop," I managed, my eyes darting toward the tent flap. "Someone might." Liam just shook his head, that same little smile playing on his lips. "Chill. No one's coming in. They are all asleep." I wanted to believe him, desperately, but my stomach was doing gymnastics with worry. I backed away, every cell in my body yearning to be closer to him, but the rational part of me was screaming. "We can't do this here," I said, trying to project a sense of control. "It's too risky." He just watched me for what felt like an eternity before finally nodding. "Yeah, you're right." But then, he added, "This isn't over, right?" The question was loaded. Was this just some random moment, something we'd push to the side and pretend never happened? Or was it the beginning of something bigger, something potentially life-altering? "No," I whispered, looking right into his eyes, "it's not over." His smile was a promise, a silent agreement to navigate this new territory together. We settled into our sleeping bags, the thin material doing little to block the knowledge that we were feet away from each other. Sleep was fitful, interrupted by whispered questions and the rustling of leaves. The next day felt like walking on eggshells. Every shared task, from gathering firewood to preparing meals, was fraught with tension and a new awareness. We tried to act normal, but the forest itself seemed to watch us, amplifying the electric charge that now existed between us. During our midday hike, we lagged behind the rest of the group, drawn to a secluded clearing hidden amongst the trees. The sunlight dappled through the leaves, creating an intimate space. There, we finally talked, not in whispered breaths, but in earnest questions, about the feelings that had pulled us off course. It wasn't a definitive conversation, but it was an acknowledgement that this was real, and that we were going to face it together. That evening, after the others had settled by the fire, we slipped away again. We found ourselves at the base of a massive oak tree, a silent witness to our childhood escapades. There, under the starlight, we found our own kind of magic. We ended up tangled on the forest floor, his hands everywhere, making my skin burn. It wasn't just a kiss this time, his hands explored the curve of my neck, the line of my jaw, sending shivers through me. I found myself tracing the lines of his back, my fingers desperate to touch him, to map every inch of his skin. Everything just faded away, until it was only us, in a bubble of our own making, a world where only we existed. The air was thick with unspoken desires, and the weight of the shouldn't was slowly giving way to the could. The intimate moment was a mix of passion and desperate need, something that both terrified and electrified me. Later that night, the harsh reality came crashing in, just like before. What were we doing? What if someone found out? What if this screwed everything up? We were outside, with no walls to protect us, only the sounds of the forest to bear witness to our vulnerability. "Wait," I gasped, pulling away, breathless and shaky, the cold air chilling the heat on my skin. "We shouldn't." He looked at me like I'd just punched him in the gut. "Why not?" "No one's watching," Liam replied. "That's not the point," I retorted, running a hand through my hair, the fear rising again. "What if someone finds out? What if we mess everything up?" He was silent for a beat, before letting out a long sigh. "Look, I know you're freaked out, and honestly, I am too. But we can't pretend this isn't happening. I'm not pretending, I shot back, feeling worked up. But this could destroy everything. Our friendship, everything. His jaw tightened. So, what? Do you want to just stop? I froze, caught between the fear and the undeniable pull. I don't know, I mumbled, my voice a whisper. The clearing went silent, the words hanging in the air. For a moment, I thought I'd ruined everything, but then he reached for my hand. Look, Liam said, his voice gentle but firm. I don't want to lose you, but I don't want to hide who I am either. If this is too much, it's fine, but I can't keep pretending. His words were like a slap in the face, a challenge to the part of me that just wanted to crawl back into the safety of our old friendship. I don't want to lose you either, I said, my voice shaky. But this is scary. He gave me a soft, understanding look. Hey, he whispered, we got this. Baby steps. Yeah, I nodded, my heart doing cartwheels. Yeah. His smile melted away the tension, and when he leaned in for a kiss, it felt like everything was finally going to be okay. For the rest of our trip, we lived a fragile double life within the confines of the woods. By day, we were just part of the group, but by night, we sought each other out, navigating this new terrain, finding moments of intimacy and connection in the shadows of the trees. The last day dawned bright, the air crisp with a hint of the coming autumn. While packing up, I caught Ben's eye, a look that held too much knowledge. I knew then that our secret might not stay hidden for long. That afternoon, during our final hike, we fell behind again. This time, there was a sense of urgency. I knew that this was the last chance to say what we needed to, before the world outside of the woods invaded our fragile bubble. As we walked through a particularly dense part of the woods, I saw Ben emerge through the trees. He clearly had been following us. It was done now. We're done hiding, Liam announced to Ben. My heart did a crazy flip, what was he doing? But he was done playing by the rules, done with fear, and he was owning it, hand on my shoulder. Yeah, what about it? Ben was a combination of shock and disgust. He clearly thought that his assumptions were a sick joke. But Liam didn't falter. We have to go, Liam said, pulling me through the dense brush. We walked together, the sound of Ben's words fading behind us. We stopped under an oak tree, one that had always been a witness to our deepest secrets. It was bold and brash, like anyone could find us, and it was everything. It was quick and dirty, but it felt right. Liam gave me a small smile, shy and determined. We're in this together, whatever happens, he said. Yeah, I nodded, a real sense of determination growing in me. Walking out of the woods, together, I knew that we were still not out of the woods yet. People would talk and stare and maybe do a lot worse. But right now, it didn't matter. We were together, and I just had this new sense of freedom, like we were finally claiming who we were and what we meant to each other. Sure, we weren't making it easier, but we had each other, and that was enough. Walking next to Liam, their weight was lifted for a moment, but deep down I knew, this wasn't over. It was just the beginning, and the real hard stuff was yet to come, no matter where we were. The woods might have been our secret world, but the reality of the world was now impossible to ignore.